We're going over System Pticha, Preface to the Wisdom of Kabbalah by Bala Sulam, Chapter 2, 5 Discernments in the Masach. Session 14, Mating by Striking, Lights and Vessels. Mating by Striking.
Mating by striking. Baha Salam, 22. Thus you see how the 5 levels of 10 Sephiro emanations emerge through 5 kinds of Zivug Dehakat, mating by striking, of the Masak screen, applied on its 5 measures of Abayut, coarseness in it. And now I shall tell you the reason, for it is known that light is not attained without a Kli, vessel. Explanation, 22. Thus you can see how the 5 levels of tension, emanations, emerge through 5 kinds of reflection, mating by striking, of the screen, applied on its 5 measures of coarseness in it. And now I shall tell you the reason, for it is known that reality is only perceived with perception.
Mating by striking. Explanation. Item 22. Thus you can see how the 5 levels of tension, emanations, emerge through 5 kinds of reflection, mating by striking, of the screen, applied on its 5 measures of coarseness in it. And now I shall tell you the reason, for it is known that reality is only perceived with a perception. So what we're going to be talking about in this session is talking about the mating by striking, of how on different levels of coarseness in the screen, it gives different levels of height of reflected light. So for example, if we are in a state where we're using Malchut, which is phase 4 of coarseness, we will get the height all the way to Keter, crown. If we're using only phase 3 of coarseness, which is Tiferet, beauty, then we reach the height only up to Chachma, which is wisdom. If we are using phase 2 as our coarseness, which is Bina, understanding, we reach the height of Bina, understanding. And if we have coarseness of phase 1, which is Chachma, wisdom, then we reach the height of Tiferet, which is beauty. And then finally, if we only have the coarseness of the root phase, which is Keter, crown, then we can only reach the level of kingdom, which is Malchut.
Shouldn't we always be in the coarseness of Malkut, or does it fluctuate according to what phase you're dealing with?
So the idea is that when you're advancing through the phases, it's basically dictated that you start at the beginning with the highest coarseness, which is phase 4, and then it slowly dissipates, and then you start again, then at phase 3, and then it dissipates, and phase 2 and dissipates, and then phase 1 dissipates, and then finally you got the root coarseness, and then of course you reach phase 2 after the barrier, which is dealing with already going beneath the navel, the tabor. So what we're dealing with now is just the mechanism of mating by striking, but in every phase throughout the advancement, this process keeps on happening.
Once you reach phase 2, the world of Nikodim, and beyond, the coarseness starts to increase, right? So it's like in the world of Adam Kadmon, the coarseness sort of dissipates and loses coarseness from Galgalta to Bon, and then does it go up sort of in coarseness again, on sort of.
So the idea is all these degrees that we're dealing with in the mating by striking, let's say in the world of Adam Kadmon, primordial man, which is from 1.1 to 1.4 after the barrier, we're dealing there with the coarseness levels of, like on a zoom out level of root phase, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And phase 4 is disabled, which is the ego, right, which is beneath the tabor. Then afterwards, when we go into the world of Nikudim, which is the world of deficiencies, that's when we work with the ego, which is the phase 4 coarseness, right? So the idea is that in primordial man, you're basically dealing with phase 3 coarseness, and going through all these different mating by strikings on different levels in that phase 3 coarseness. And then when you go to the world of deficiencies, which is 2.1 and onwards, then you're actually dealing with the phase 4 coarseness. So it's like We say the primordial man is when you're above your ego, because you're dealing with phase 3. And then in the world of deficiencies, you're in your ego, which is phase 4.
So what's really Galgata here as far as coarseness? Because there is the highest coarseness, Galgata, in Adam Kadmon.
Yeah.
So I guess you could say what the highest coarseness in a phase 3 coarseness.
Exactly. Yeah. There's lots of like dealing with levels. It's like in the whole of primordial man, we're dealing just with the light of nefesh. But then you're like, but it says, we'll see afterwards that it says you get also yichida. Yeah, it's like yichida of nefesh. So it's like a subcategory of nefesh. Nefesh also divides into 5 parts. And then in the world of deficiencies, we're mostly dealing with the light of ruach. And then in Atzilut, we're dealing, which is 3.1 to 3.4, we're dealing with mostly the light of neshama, which is, the protection. And then after intercorrection, you're dealing with the light of chaya, which is expression. And then when you reach the eyes not seen, then you're dealing with the light of yichida, which is singularity.
I have a question about this, the 5 levels of tension. They're categorized. We've got 5 levels. They have names to them, but what's the qualitative difference in these different levels of tension? Is it more tension, more discernments, more what? What's the?
So for example, when we cross the barrier, on one hand, we are using, phase 4 coarseness, but your details are very little. You don't have much details, but your feeling is more sort of, you feel relaxed and you feel like fully relaxed. Then afterwards, as you advance, you get more details, but then the coarseness goes down. So your sort of, your feeling of being above reality decreases over time. So at the beginning, you're like, oh, I'm above reality, I'm above my ego, I'm looking from the world from above, I'm feeling relaxed. And then slowly you sort of get closer to reality until you don't have any coarseness. And then you have to actually go into reality. You reduce that speed from being above, and then you have to go closer into the ego itself. Let's continue. Before and after the barrier.
Before and after the barrier, Baal Sulam. Also, you know that these 5 measures of Aviyut coarseness come from the 5 measures of Aviyut coarseness in Pchinat Dalet, phase 4. Prior to the Tzimtzum restriction, there were 5 Kelim vessels in Pchinat Dalet, phase 4, calling the 10 Sefirot Kachab Tum, crown, wisdom, understanding, beauty, and kingdom. Item 18. After Tzimtzum Aleph, first restriction, they were incorporated in the 5 measures of the Masach screen, which along with the Or Chozer reflected light it elevates, return to being 5 Kelim vessels with respect to the Or Chozer reflected light and the 10 Sefirot emanations Kachab Tum, crown, wisdom, understanding, beauty, and kingdom, instead of the 5 Kelim vessels in Pchinat Dalet phase 4 itself, prior to the Tzimtzum restriction. Explanation. Also, you know that these 5 measures of coarseness come from the 5 measures of coarseness in phase 4. Prior to crossing the barrier, first restriction, there were 5 vessels in phase 4, calling the 10 emanations collapsed into crown, wisdom, understanding, beauty, and kingdom. Item 18. After the barrier, they are incorporated in the 5 measures of the screen, which along with the reflected light it elevates, return to being 5 vessels with respect to the reflected light, and the 10 emanations collapsed into crown, wisdom, understanding, beauty, and kingdom. This is instead of the 5 vessels in phase 4 prior to crossing the barrier.
Before the barrier. Explanation. Also, you know that these 5 measures of coarseness come from the 5 measures of coarseness in phase 4. Prior to crossing the barrier, the first restriction, there were 5 vessels in phase 4, clothing the 10 emanations collapsed into crown, wisdom, understanding, beauty, and kingdom. Item 18. So when we talk about how they collapsed, so the idea is we got Pchinat Shoresh root phase, which is parallel to Keter, which is crown. We've got Bechina Aleph, phase 1, which is parallel to Chochmah, which is wisdom. Bechina Bet, which is phase 2, corresponding to Bina, understanding. And then Bechina Gimel, phase 3, which is sometimes also called as just one Tiferet beauty, is collapsed in, when you uncollapse it, when you expand it, it goes into the 6 emanations of Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. So Chesed is kindness, Gvura is judgment, Tiferet is beauty, Netzach is eternity, Hod is majesty, and Yesod is foundation. And then finally, Bechina Dalet, phase 4, corresponds to Malchut, which is kingdom.
So this is the coarseness before the barrier. This is what's in the vessel, the coarseness that's in the vessel before the barrier, right? This exists. This is basically the base here that gets used later for the masach, the coarseness they use later for the masach, right?
Exactly. This is sort of the basic building block that we're going to sort of be doing all different manipulations on it with a combination of the coarseness integrated into the screen.
Now, somebody regular on the street, whatever, everybody has this. This is coarseness that everybody has. This is what their vessel is made of, right?
Say that again?
I was saying this is the building block. This is the foundation of what a vessel is before the barrier. Just a straight up vessel with coarseness. This is what everybody has.
Exactly. Well, not everybody has, basically if you're before the barrier, this is what you have.
Well, that's what I'm saying. We're talking about phase 1, before the barrier. Basically, anybody really that doesn't have a screen, this is what they have. Just a basic vessel with coarseness, some desire. The light fills this desire dissipates.
Exactly. We normally say that Keter crown represents the still vegetative and animal. Then you've got phase 1, which represents humanity. Phase 2, which is spiritual society. Phase 3 is the group. And then finally phase 4, which is the individual.
So Zachary, can you hear me?
Yes.
I had a problem with that. So what Moshe says doesn't seem, it seems to me that Chochmah, humanity is what most of the people are in. They're not advancing to the spiritual society.
That is true. So you can see how, like, most of, the element that is the most is the still, right? Still, vegetative, and animal. And then sort of, there's less humans, which is humanity. And then there's less people that want to, know the meaning of life, which is the spiritual society. And then you've got less people that actually want to advance, which is phase 3. And then finally, you've got even less people that actually want to cross the barrier, which is phase 4.
Okay, so most people in the street are in humanity phases.
Exactly.
Like phase 1.
Yes.
Root phase and phase 1, right?
Yeah.
And they have those things, but they're not active.
Exactly. It's like if they don't have it, we sort of say that they don't. Like, if they're not using it, we say they don't have it, you could say. You could say they have it maybe in like a future potential, but they're not actually, it's not actualized.
So all their desires for money, sex, power, external power, all those come from more or less from Aleph coarseness?
Yeah, phase 1.
Okay.
The idea is that you'd say, well, isn't phase 1 pure? It's like, yeah, the idea is that their coarseness is pure, and therefore they're just annul to reality. So reality basically dictates their desires, and therefore that's why they have very external desires, such as food, sex, family, money, honor, and knowledge. They're all external desires in your reality, and there's no sort of internal desires. There's no desire for a person to get internal power, to have that internal connection to the system, understand himself. He's more interested in doing things in reality, and that's because they're in that phase 1, which is like a candle nailed to a torch.
And it's our default position.
Exactly. We're basically born with a very small coarseness, and the idea is that as we advance, we grow our coarseness, and that's how we get all the different degrees.
So we're like improving our hardware and software.
we're improving our software, not our hardware. So you could say our hardware is our body, and then our software is our perception. So, you know, when we're actually making a differentiation between the hardware and the software, and we're saying we're only upgrading your software and not upgrading your hardware. You know, if you reach enter correction, you're not going to necessarily have wings and be able to fly. That would be your hardware.
Right.
We're dealing only with the software, which is our perception.
Yeah, it's like evolving from Windows to Mac. Huh?
Well, it's like upgrading from Windows, let's say 7 to 10. So your software is changing, and you're getting more features and changes and stuff, but your hardware is still the same. Your senses stay the same. One of the problems is that people they're so used to thinking of hardware, so they think that by software changes, their hardware will change. So they're like, oh, if I advance, suddenly I'll be able to see things, you know, with my eyes that I wasn't able to see before. I'm able to see ghosts and angels and stuff. It's like, no, you totally missed the point. When we're upgrading the software, we're improving our perception, we're maturing our perception, and our hardware stays exactly the same. If you have any kind of, physical illness, if you're disabled, you'll stay disabled even if you reach ender correction. It's got nothing to do with it. Your hardware is what your hardware is. The software, that's what we want to mature by cleaning concepts and advancing.
These 6 Sephiroth that are collapsed in Tiferet, that suggests to me that there are varieties of coarseness in Tiferet. And if that's so, are these utilized in some special way later?
So the idea is that the reason why the sub-emanations of Tiferet are given different names is because they lack the light of wisdom. So the idea is that root phase 1 and phase 2, is dealing with the light of wisdom, which is expression, which is dealing with the will to receive. Phase 3, because it's dealing with advancement, it's dealing with alignment, it's dealing with the light of mercy, and not with the light of wisdom. And therefore, their sub-emanations are given different names. So the idea is that chesed is corresponding to keter, which is crown. Gevura, which is judgment, is corresponding to chokhmah, which is wisdom. Tiferet, beauty, is corresponding to bina, which is understanding. Netzach, eternity, is corresponding to Tiferet, beauty. Hod, majesty, is corresponding to Malchut, which is kingdom. And the idea is that your Sod foundation is basically a container that contains each of the other emanations within it. So it's not an emanation of itself, rather it's like a funnel, it's a container, it's like a salad containing all the different parts previously, and basically it's used as a funnel to pass down to Malchut, which is kingdom. So it's not because it's better, it's actually considered not as important as the light of wisdom, and therefore they're given lesser names. It's called an enlightenment of wisdom instead of the light of wisdom itself. Let's continue. After the barrier. Explanation. After the barrier, they are incorporated into the 5 measures of the screen, which along with the reflected light it elevates, returns to being 5 vessels. With respect to the reflected light on the 10 emanations collapsed into crown, wisdom, understanding, beauty, and kingdom. This is instead of the 5 vessels in phase 4 prior to crossing the barrier. So basically you've got Bechina Daled, which is phase 4, it's Aviut, its coarseness, and it's sub 5 degrees of coarseness, right? So you've got root, first phase, second phase, third phase, and fourth phase. And these are incorporated into the screen. So the screen, the masach, the screen, its matter is made of kashiut, which is hardness. And the will to receive, the coarseness, is incorporated into that screen. And the idea is that when we're talking about changes of coarseness, we're also talking about the changes of hardness. The hardness is always equal to the coarseness. Because the idea is that the amount that you're going to attract after the barrier, you want to be able to reject its automatic reactive behavior on you and you want to make it into active behavior. So you need your hardness, your ability to sort of make yourself independent from reality has to be equal to the amount of tension that you're attracting into yourself.
What gives the cashew its hardness, rigidity?
We talk about how the screen, the hardness is basically the point in the heart. So the point in the heart, as we grow the point in the heart, we go through the phases of the passive point in the heart, the active point in the heart, the intense point in the heart, and then finally when you cross the barrier, that becomes the screen. So we've got that sort of mix between our coarseness, which is our egoism, and the hardness, which is our altruism.
So the cashew is the altruism?
Yes. It's the ability to take control over our lives, to take responsibility, to take ownership over what's happening in our lives and actually be active instead of reactive.
So it's the intent of taking control and becoming the manager that creates the hardness.
Exactly. So it's like, hardness is like willpower, you could say, where sort of you really want to do something, and at the same time, you've got willpower to sort of able to not do what you really want to do. So normally we think of that in actions, and here we're talking about states. So the idea is you can have an action where, you really want to eat food and, but you're on a diet, and then you have willpower or hardness to say, even though I really want to eat the food, I'm going to not eat the food, right? So you're like taking control of yourself, and you feel that, if you're successful, you feel really good with yourself. You feel powerful. You're like, wow, I was able to, reject my own desires. But those are actions. A state, and that's what we're dealing with in advancement, a state is where that's your state. You live in it. It's not like you're having to do it. It's not like, if, for example, someone's in a diet, they're dealing with their diet when they're dealing with food. A state is when your entire perception is sort of enveloped into that situation. So it's like you can do, for example, an action of bestowal, or you can be in a state of bestowal. If you're doing an action of bestowal, for example, could be where reality is saying to you, you have to do one thing, and then you're going sort of against what reality or your desires are saying, and you're like, I'm going to do something else. And you could do that at specific points throughout your life, and that would be considered an action of bestowal. A state of bestowal is when anything you're meeting in your life, you're constantly looking at it from the side and evaluating it and saying, do I need to apply filters onto it? Do I need to think what they're saying is like direct? Should I, if someone, for example, says, you're lazy, should I immediately receive that and think, well, I'm lazy, that's bad? Or should I stop, put a filter on and say, well, actually, lazy is a good quality? Because they're basically saying, you think before you do things. So you're not going to just do, nonsensical actions. You're not just going to follow the crowd. You're going to think, you're going to be more observant of, is this actually good for me to do or not? So then they're actually praising you when they're saying you're lazy. So it becomes from a complaint or a criticism, actually becomes into a praise. That ability to constantly be in that state where you're able to review and analyze and scrutinize what you're getting from your desires or from reality, that is called a state of the still. And we get that state when we cross the barrier.
I would say also, I want to add, I know we talked about the screen and hardness and stuff. I would say from what we learned in previous sessions is that whatever I reject is reality that I'm not able to take causality of it yet. Right? Is that true? No. That I can't handle. I can't take causality of this type of this reality, so I'm rejecting it.
So you're talking about surrounding light.
Well, by rejection, it's creating surrounding light.
So the idea is that there's two parts in the rejection. There's the initial rejection, which is basically sort of before anything comes into me, let me just stop everything and sort of be the controller of the situation. Then I'm decide how much tension I can actually can handle, and I'm going to convert that into power, and that's called inner light. And then the rest of it, I'm going to reject and becomes surrounding light. So you've got two operations. You've got the initial rejection, and then, so you could say the rejection in potential, and then you've got the actual rejection, which is sort of what makes the surrounding light.
Yeah, but the actual rejection is what? Saying, I can't handle this. I can't take causality of this yet. I can't.
Exactly.
It has to be it, right? And,
Right.
and what are you saying? Go ahead.
You got the first rejection, which is basically saying, it's not like a rejection, it's more like, wait a minute sort of thing. And when someone says, wait a minute, they're not rejecting anything. They're just saying, let me review what we have here, right? And that's what's done in the head. Then afterwards, in the body of the face of the Parzuf, that's when it decides, okay, this is what I can actually handle, which is called, the above the tabor, above the navel, is what you can actually handle. And then you've got below the tabor, which is what you can't handle, and therefore you reject it, and it becomes surrounding light.
Well, can you say that for the most part, I mean, you really don't receive any tension that you can't handle to begin with? So I would say that for the most part, it's pretty much reflected light all the way through, and then whatever I'm really feeling as internal light, as inner light, is really what I can sort of take causality of it, that I'm the root cause of it.
Exactly, and that's why when you cross the barrier, it's considered a line where it's very thin. It's the amount that you're actually taking causality over is actually very little, because you're only taking causality over the root phase, phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. But phase 4, which is actually the biggest of them all, you're actually not taking causality over. So then you're basically, it's like a line compared to a circle. It's like a thin pizza slice.
And really the process, just to continue, it's constantly, even through endocorrection beyond, is constantly basically working with expanding our inner light as much as possible. And the more tension we can handle, the more another situation will come a little bit greater and a little bit greater and a little bit greater. And that's basically the whole idea, is just constantly taking more causality and basically expanding that inner light, right?
So when you reach end of correction, that's when your circle's full.
The what?
When you reach end of correction, that's when your circle is full of light. There's no more surrounding light, you could say. It's all inner light. And then when you reach that, then you start it's like, now that you've got all the light, now you work on actually like working with that light and sort of getting better at your craft and sort of improving your usage of it. So what you've got until end of correction is just getting a hold onto like the entire matter, you could say, the entire tension, and then you get to work with it after end of correction.
Yeah, but then how do we use tension after end of correction? Because it's like, I feel like the tension is a tool. And what you're saying that now after end of correction, it's completely full, and you have now everything to use. And then what are we saying? That there's no more tension? It's not necessary anymore? Like,
there's no tension, but the idea is that now you're sort of getting experience using that tension. So it's not that think of it like this, until end of correction, you're basically controlled on, like, you can't receive more tension than you can handle. It's like, if someone's in, he's just crossed the barrier and he's like, well, what if I want to use phase 4 coarseness? It's like, no, you can't. It's like, you can't go into the ego sort of when you've crossed the barrier, right? You have to wait until you get to 2.1 and so forth. So the idea is when you're at end correction, that's when you're sort of independent to sort of, you've got it all, and now you decide what you can actually do with it. And so you're sort of controlled and given this very gradual revealing of your coarseness.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what happens after the correction, because I feel like in that case, what we were saying is if you have it all, then it's like almost like tension is not necessary anymore. So I'm trying to figure out, well, how is tension necessary? And how can you use it?
Can I add?
Yeah, go for it.
My sense of it is that what we spoke about a little bit yesterday is learning to calibrate how much you use in your environment and internally. It's like when you've got it turned on all the way, then the tension comes to you so that you recognize that there's certain situations where you can't use it to its fullest extent. It teaches you to limit it, and in reference to creating the environment. So the tension just shows you how to calibrate the amount of light that you use when you deal with your environment, your creator self. It's like, you could turn the hose on full blast and flood the place, or you can recognize that, oh wait, it just needs a trickle here. I've got to turn this way down. And the only way you know whether to turn it down or not is when you feel the tension of using it full blast. So it's like you're practicing a new aspect now. You're practicing the use of it, and the tension shows you when you've got to calibrate more or less.
So can we say that here we're creating the tension instead of before in the correction where the tension is given to you? Well,
yes, I agree 100% with that. Yes.
So basically, like until into correction, the system controls how much tension you're going to be given. You're like given, it's like a course. You're like given, like, okay, now you've handled this. Congratulations. Now let's give you the next level, right? And then it's like a game of checkers, right? We can only go in a certain sort of direction. And then when you reach the end of the board, then you can decide to go wherever you want.
And you feel that sense of responsibility too right away, especially after your first explosion.
Yes. All right, let's continue. Crown and wisdom.
Crown and wisdom, Baal HaSolam. Accordingly, it is clear that if a Masak screen contains all these 5 levels of Aviut coarseness, it contains the 5 Kalim vessels to clothe the 10 Sephirot emanations. But when it does not contain all 5 measures, since the Aviut coarseness of Bechina Dalet, phase 4, is absent in it, it contains only 4 Kalim vessels. Hence, it can only clothe four lights. Hab Tum, wisdom, understanding, beauty, and kingdom, and lacks 1 light, the light of Keter, crown, just as it lacks 1 Kli, vessel, Aviut, coarseness of Bechina Dalet, phase 4. Explanation. Accordingly, it is clear that if a screen contains all these 5 levels of coarseness, it contains the 5 vessels to clothe the 10 emanations. But when it does not contain all 5 measures, since the coarseness of phase 4 is absent in it, it contains only 4 vessels. Hence, it can only clothe 4 lights, wisdom, understanding, beauty, and kingdom, and lacks 1 light, which is the light of crown, just as it lacks 1 vessel, which is the light just as it lacks 1 vessel, which is the coarseness of phase 4.
Crown. Explanation. Accordingly, it is clear that if a screen contains all these 5 levels of coarseness, it contains the 5 vessels to clothe the 10 emanations. So what we're going to be going over in the coming slides is we're going to be dealing with, we've got, on one hand, we've got the Aviut of the Masaf, which is the coarseness of the screen. And this is showing, for example, where all 5 levels of coarseness are active. And in that situation, our reflected light, which is above the screen, is going to reach the height of Keter, which is crown, which is also called Yechidah, singularity. That's the light. And the vessel which is going to hold that light is Kli B'chinat Shoresh, the vessel of root phase. And then what is going to hold the light of Chochmah, which is wisdom, Chaya, expression, is the Kli B'china Aleph, which is the vessel of phase 1. And what's going to hold the light of Bina, which is understanding, Neshama, protection, is the Kli of B'china Bet, vessel of phase 2. And what's going to hold the light of Tiferet, which is beauty, Ruach, modulation, is going to be the Kli B'chinat Gimel, the vessel of phase 3. And then finally, what's going to hold the light of Malchut, kingdom, which is also called Nefesh, relaxation, it's going to be contained by the Kli of B'china Dalet, which is the vessel of phase 4. So you can see how, by the level of coarseness, is the height of the reflected light to clothe all the direct light. So the lights that are coming in are clothed by the vessels.
Is that correct?
Yes.
What was looking at the clarify? I know we're going to be looking at the coming slides, and it's going to be sort of looking at the height up until where it clothes the light. But also, my question was the entrance of how the light enters. That's not represented in these slides, right?
We'll be dealing with that in item 24 and 25.
All right. Just want to make sure. Yeah. Because when I look at these slides here, the entrance, it doesn't show it the right way.
Right. So it's showing the result, not the process.
Okay. It shows the result, the final result.
Exactly, the final result. And then when we go to item 24 and 25, then we're going to be dealing with
we'll put a microscope on it and look at how it entered, what direction and how it entered, right?
Exactly. It's like, this is like the plate of food, and then you're like, how was it made? And then, we're going to deal in the following items, dealing with how it's actually, what's the order that they come in. So the idea that the light is always uniform, and the vessels that we sort of get by the coarseness that we activate decides how much of that light we can actually clothe. So if we can clothe all the way, then we're able to clothe all the different lights and all the different sub-feelings of nefesh, which is relaxation, which is what we're dealing in this situation. So when we're saying modulation, we're talking about like the modulation of relaxation, the protection of relaxation, the expression of relaxation, and the singularity of relaxation. If we're talking about the faces, the partsufim of Adam Kadmon, primordial man, which is 1.1 to 1.4. After the Barrier, of course. Let's continue. Wisdom. But when it does not contain all 5 measures, since the coarseness of phase 4 is absent in it, contains only 4 vessels. Let me start that again. Wisdom. But when it does not contain all 5 measures, since the coarseness of phase 4 is absent in it, it contains only 4 vessels. Hence it can only clothe 4 lights: wisdom, understanding, beauty, and kingdom, and lacks 1 light, which is the light of crown, just as it lacks 1 vessel, which is the coarseness of phase 4. So we can see here, now that the aviyut of Bchina Dalet, the phase 4 coarseness, is disabled, now we're only using the aviyut of Bchina Gimel, which is the phase 3 coarseness. And therefore, we only have 4 vessels to clothe the light, and therefore we can't clothe the highest light, which is the light of Keter, crown, Yechidah, singularity. We can only clothe the light of Chochmah, which is wisdom, Chai, expression, the light of Bina, understanding, Neshama, protection, the light of Tiferet, beauty, Ruach, modulation, and the light of Malchut, kingdom, which is Nefesh, relaxation. And notice how there's now a difference between, you can see that between the color schemes, where now the light of Chochmah is actually contained in the vessel of the root phase, while the light of Bina is contained in the vessel of phase 1, light of Tiferet in the vessel of phase 2, and the light of Malchut in the vessel of phase 3. So you can see that inverse relationship between the lights and the vessels. So when we have all the lights and all the vessels, then they're equal. But when we start having less vessels, we start seeing a discrepancy between the lights and the vessels.
Sakai, I guess I'm a little behind here. The coarseness that we're showing below here that came out of our vessel from Dalet, this then is above the Masak, the vessels here that are being created. This is done by the reflecting light, and this is the Rosh?
Right, yeah, this is the head. This is the Rosh. The head.
Okay.
Reflected light.
Maybe to clarify that.
We're not dealing with what actually goes into the body of the vessel. So this is the coarseness of the screen, the aviyut of the Masach, and then by having that certain coarseness degree, and we said beforehand that it's also the same degree of hardness, that's sort of the degree of reflected light that we can reach. So when we're dealing with wisdom, we can only reach the reflected light of wisdom, and we can't reach the reflected light of crown if we only are using phase 3 coarseness.
Like I have a question. In like Bchina Aleph, humanity, what is the difference between the light that comes in first we deal with humanity with the nefesh, and then the nefesh light, and after in the ruach light, and it goes up to the chaya light, and then we can handle the humanity, the humanity.
So the idea is that if we're dealing, for example, with humanity, which is phase one, the highest degree is when what we saw beforehand, where phase one was including the light of Chokhmah, which it's an expression which basically means you can manipulate humanity, right? And that's the sort of highest degree that what you can do with humanity. If you don't have enough coarseness, then all you can do is just be protected from humanity. And if you've got less, then you can just handle like the modulations, the changes of humanity. And if you don't even have that, then you can just be relaxed from humanity, but you sort of can't actually do anything with them.
Okay, the highest light is the Chaya light.
No, the highest for humanity is the Chaya light.
Yes, for humanity. Then you can make an expression.
Yeah, you can manipulate them.
You manipulate, you can control them.
Exactly, using internal power. So we're talking about internally, not externally.
And the phases before that, you have less light in the Bechina Aleph, in humanity, you sort of, I didn't understand what does it mean, relaxation and modulation in the...
So protection is protecting yourself from effects from them. So for example, let's say they say something hurtful. So if you're in the state of protection, you're protected from it. You can't, it's sort of, you're protected from them hurting you. In expression, you're sort of in offense, you're sort of active towards them, you're manipulating them. In protection, you're more like defense, where you're defending from them, right? In modulation, you can't stop them from entering you, but now you can modulate how they enter you. So it's like less defense, right? Now you can decide like how many sort of, they're going to able to get some goals in, but you're going to make sure that they're sort of not able to totally dominate you, right? So you've got modulation on how they're going to affect you. So for example, let's say they say something hurtful. In protection, you could be like, I don't feel, they didn't hurt me at all. Then in modulation, they hurt you a bit, and you sort of can modulate how it's going to hurt you. And then in relaxation, they're going to hurt you, but you're going to have sort of this distance that you're going to be still relaxed even though they've hurt you. So you're still going to be hurt, but you're not going to be like lost in it. So if, for example, someone says something hurtful to you, if you don't even have the degree of relaxation, you're lost in the emotion, you get angry, you're like, how could they do this to me? You either fall into victim mentality, or you are showing them anger. When you have relaxation, it hurt me what he said, but I'm still able to like have this calmness. I'm still able to like keep my posture, my pose. In modulation, you're able to already, you're not like just hurt and able to hold your pose. You're able to say, well, the way what they said, I can actually modulate it to actually turn it, let's say, from a curse into a blessing. In protection, it's like, he didn't even hurt me. He said something, he's an immature person. It doesn't touch me. In expression, you're like, I'm actually going to make him do this, this, and that. Right? So you can see how, depending on the degree of the vessel that you have, you can manage the phase accordingly.
Okay.
All right, let's continue. Understanding.
Understanding, Baal HaSalam. Similarly, when it lacks Bechina Gimel, phase 3, 2, and the Masak screen contains only 3 measures of Aviut coarseness, meaning only up to Bechina Bet, phase 2, it contains only 3 Kalem vessels. Thus it can only clothe 3 lights, Bechina, understanding, Tiferet, beauty, and Malhut, kingdom. In that state, the level lacks the 2 lights, Keter, crown, and Hakma, wisdom, just as it lacks the 2 Kalim, the vessels. Bechina Gimel, phase 3, and Bechina Dalet, phase 4. Explanation. Similarly, when it lacks phase 3-2, and the screen contains only 3 measures of coarseness, meaning only up to phase 2, it contains only 3 vessels. Thus, it can only clothe 3 lights: understanding, beauty, and kingdom. In that state, the level lacks the 2 lights, crown and wisdom, just as it lacks the 2 vessels, phase 3 and phase 4.
Understanding. Explanation. Similarly, when it lacks phase 3-2, and the screen contains only 3 measures of coarseness, meaning only up to phase 2, it contains only 3 vessels. Thus, it can only clothe 3 lights: understanding, beauty, and kingdom. In that state, the level lacks the 2 lights, crown and wisdom, just as it lacks the 2 vessels, phase 3 and phase 4. So we can see now that because we're only using Aviyut of Bechina Bet, which is the phase 2 coarseness of the screen, then we can only reach 3 vessels of Kli B'chinat Shoresh, the vessel of root phase, which will contain the light of Bina, understanding, which is Neshama, protection. We'll have a vessel, Kli B'china Aleph, vessel of phase 1, which will hold the light of Tiferet, beauty, which is Ruach, modulation. And then finally, we'll have the Kli B'china Bet, the vessel of phase 2, which holds the light of Malchut, kingdom, which is also Nefesh and relaxation. And you can see how we're not able to clothe the light of Chokhmah, which is wisdom, Chaya, and expression, and we certainly cannot clothe the light of Keter, which is crown, Yichida, singularity.
So as we go through this, we lose our higher lights.
Exactly. It's like the less coarseness, the less you get, the more pure lights.
So what's the purpose of that?
Well, the purpose is to allow you to sort of experience all the different degrees and all the, it's like, if you want details of something, the way to actually get details is actually by reducing what you have.
Yes,
It's like, if you're looking just at the body, well, it's hard to actually understand what the issue is, but when you're focusing on the heart of a person, then you sort of got more details about it. And then if you're focusing on just one artery, then you've got even more details about it. So it's like actually when you limit what you're focusing on, you actually have more details in it. And that's what the process is. On one hand, you could say, well, the lights are going down, it looks like I'm getting less. But you're gaining more experience because you're dealing with a more subset of emotion, of feeling, of attainment, and therefore you can actually have more discernments on it. While if you're just giving you're given the whole wide range, you can't discern things yet.
Zaka.
Yeah, we talked about that a long time ago. The details, reducing the light. Yeah.
Yes.
Zakai, I'm still trying to figure out why you color-coded the lights the way you did. Like the light of Nefesh, you colored it green.
So
the light of Malchut, why did you call it?
So I went basically by the order of the of Keter, Chochmah, Bina, Tiferet, and Malchut.
What do you mean?
So Keter is root phase.
Oh.
Phase.
Am I mistaken that this has changed?
What? Yeah, we changed it.
Okay, because I'll be honest with you, I was looking it over yesterday and something didn't look right, and this probably was it.
Exactly.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Because why I was asking beforehand about the entrance and exits of the light was because when I was looking at the slide, it didn't look right to me.
I agree with you.
Okay. Okay. Well, this is correct, and okay. Well, did you also color code it like because the way Baal Salam wrote like the light of Malchut, the light of Tiferet, kind of like the way he kind of described it, and sort of the light of Malchut, you can say is
phase 4.
Is phase 4.
Baal Salam didn't use the words Yichida, Chaya, Neshama, Ruach, Nefesh. We added that in just to sort of also correct the future, but also sort of give more of an understanding because we normally use Keter, Chochmah, Bina, Tiferet, Malchut as vessels and not as lights. And here's using them as lights. So the idea is to sort of get that correlation in check.
Okay. He doesn't do that often, though. Does he do that often?
Well, again, it depends on sort of what it It depends on the context. So what he's doing, he's sort of like leading up to things. So because he's leading up to basically item 23, where he's going to ask a question, why are they in inverse relationship? So he's sort of, because he's leading up to it, he doesn't want to use already the names of the lights of, Yechidah, Chaya, Neshama, Ruach, and Nefesh, because then you can already see that there's a difference between the vessels and the lights. He wants to lead up to it, so he's going to say, like, he's going to use the lights, the same names as the vessels, and be like, well, why is it that this is different from that? Why is, why is it we have vessel phase 2, which is Bina, but we're having the light of Malchut? It's like, shouldn't the light of Malchut, shouldn't this be Malchut, and then this be Tiferet, and then this be, Bina? Like, why is it that we're sort of losing the vessels? We're actually losing the lower vessels, the more coarse vessels. But with the lights, we actually have sort of the coarse lights, which is relaxation, modulation, protection. So he's sort of leading up to that. He has an agenda. You could say that many times in the sessions we're cheating a bit because we're sort of like revealing like the future, like what he's going to talk about in the future. So instead of like actually going with him on this path and sort of, just writing exactly what he's writing, and then sort of you have a question. It's like, oh yeah, why is it like that? Instead of that, we're sort of giving spoiler alerts along the way.
I'm just looking at it again, like, so look here in this case, this whole inverse relationship really gets me, man. I got to tell you. But here we're looking at, let's say in this case, phase 2 coarseness, which is the highest coarseness in this particular case. In the vessel of the light part, it's the weakest light. It's like that's the inverse, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
It's like you would think that you would have the light of crown, wisdom, and understanding, but instead you have the lights of understanding, beauty, and kingdom. So there's like a mismatch. When you're not having the full coarseness, you see a mismatch between the lights and the vessels.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I'm saying. It's really easy when you see it all in, the phase 4 course, you see everything in one shot. But once you start losing coarseness, it's very complicated. I don't know,
It gets easy over time. I think when we'll go over this a few times, it'll start to sink in.
Well, I know now, up to where it closed. Like I know for whatever coarseness it is, I know it closed up to this point. Where it sits, that part I can.
Right. So that's what we'll be dealing, in the coming sessions. So we'll be able to sort of get this slowly ingrained in our minds. Let's continue. Beauty.
Beauty by Baal HaSulam. And when the Masak contains only 2 measures of Aviut, coarseness, that is, Bahina Shoresh, root phase, and Bahina Elef, first phase, it contains only 2 Kelim, vessels. Hence, it clothes only 2 lights, the light of Tiferet, beauty, and the light of Malkut, kingdom. Thus, the level lacks the 3 lights, KHB, crown, wisdom, and understanding. Just as it lacks the 3 Kelim vessels, Bahina Bet, phase 2, Bahina Gimel, phase 3, and Bahina Dalet, phase 4. Explanation. When the Masak contains only 2 measures of coarseness, that is, root phase and first phase, it contains only 2 vessels. Hence, it clothes only 2 lights, the light of beauty and the light of kingdom. Thus, the level lacks the 3 lights, crown, wisdom, and understanding, just as it lacks the 3 vessels, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4.
Beauty. Explanation. And when the screen contains only 2 measures of coarseness, that is, root phase and first phase, it contains only 2 vessels. Hence, it clothes only 2 lights, the light of beauty and the light of kingdom. Thus, the level lacks 3 lights, crown, wisdom, and understanding. just as it lacks 3 vessels, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. All right, so here we can see where we only have the Aviyut of Bechina Aleph, which is the phase 1 coarseness, and therefore we've only got 2 vessels. In Kli Bechinat Shoresh, which is the vessel of root phase, we hold the light of Tiferet, which is beauty, Ruach, modulation. And in the Kli of Bechina Aleph, which is the vessel of phase 1, we hold the light of Malchut, which is kingdom, which is also called Nefesh, and relaxation. And then the final combination, kingdom.
Kingdom, Bahasalam. And when the Masak screen has but one level of Aviyut coarseness, which is only Behinat Shoresh, root phase of the Aviyut coarseness, it has only one Kli vessel. Hence, it can clothe only one light, the light of Malchut, kingdom. This level lacks the 4 lights, Kahab, crown, wisdom, understanding, and Tiferet, beauty, just as it lacks the 4 Kalim, vessels, Aviyut coarseness, of Behina Dalet, phase 4, Behina Gimel, phase 3, Behina Bet, phase 2, and Behina Aleph, phase 1. Explanation. And when the screen has but one level of coarseness, which is only root phase of the coarseness, it has only one vessel. Hence it can clothe only one light, the light of kingdom. This level lacks the 4 lights, crown, wisdom, understanding, and beauty, just as it lacks the 4 vessels, coarseness of phase 4, phase 3, phase 2, and phase 1.
Kingdom. Explanation. And when the screen has but one level of coarseness, which is only root phase of the coarseness, it has only one vessel. Hence it can clothe only one light, the light of kingdom. This level lacks the 4 lights, crown, wisdom, understanding, and beauty, just as it lacks the 4 vessels, coarseness of phase 4, phase 3, phase 2, and phase 1. Right, so this is the final situation where we only have the Aviyut of Bechinat Shoresh, the root phase coarseness, in the screen, and then we only have one vessel, which is the Kli Bechinat Shoresh, the vessel of root phase, that only holds one light, the light of Malchut, kingdom, which is also called Nefesh, and relaxation. And as you can see, in this situation, we're missing the light of Tiferet, which is beauty, Ruach, modulation. We're also missing the light of Bina, understanding, which is Neshama, protection, the light of Chochmah, wisdom, which is Chaya, expression, and finally we're also missing the light of Keter, crown, which is Yechida, singularity.
And after going through this loss of each level of the light, what has the student just gone to? What's just occurred?
When they're in the situation?
Yes.
So we're talking here about a mechanism. So this mechanism repeats. So you'll have this mechanism in 1.1 when you're going through the phases of Galgalta and Ab. And also you'll experience this, like especially this phase, and also in Sag, Ma, and Bon. So you'll basically experience it nearly in every situation, because you'll always have a situation where you have the root phase coarseness, and then you'll have the light of Malchut and kingdom. While, for example, when you're dealing with Ab, you won't have the first situation of all the lights and all the vessels. And in Sag, you'll only have 3 vessels and 3 lights. And then in Ma, you'll only have 2 vessels and 2 lights. And then finally in Bon, you'll only have 1 vessel and 1 light.
And this is kind of like working kind of a spiritual muscle, certain particular muscles, so that they become familiar, so that after correction, when we're learning to turn the dial up or down, we've already experienced that through these different phases.
Exactly. It's definitely like building a muscle. It's like a spiritual muscle where every time you're, putting the weights down and then releasing them, and then you're putting them down a little less and then releasing them, putting down a little less and releasing. So you're going through the releasing part each time, but you're pulling, your attracting force is less as you go through the stages.
Okay, great.
I'm wondering if with the loss of these lights and cleats, if we wouldn't be able to see all the cause and effects that our actions do. I mean, we wouldn't be able to see that, right? In this phase with the loss of the other cleats.
So what we're doing is we're we're dealing with our outlook on life. So we're not actually dealing with the actions themselves. We're dealing more with a general outlook of how we handle situations in our lives. So it's not like if I do something and I immediately know why it's happening. It's talking about like, how am I responding to the situations? It's more like a response, sort of differences of response, and not sort of knowing, oh, this is why I did this, or this is why I did that. It's like your ability to handle your perception, your handling reality that's around you in all different of its situations.
So in that sense, then, if I don't have the rest that I would need, I want to be able to respond to certain situations in life. I mean, perhaps my response wouldn't be as effective as if I would have Tiferet and Bina and Chokhmah, right?
Exactly. It's like you wouldn't be reactive, but your response to it would be much more passive and less active, you could say. So the idea is that the more vessels you have, and the higher the lights, then you're more active in your participation in your reality. And the lower the vessels, which means lower the lights, then you're sort of more passive in your response to reality.
And I believe that at the end, what I need to be is to be more active, so I can have more control of my responses, and not just to be an object of what's happening around me or to me.
It's like
okay.
It's going from defense to offense. So the higher the degree, the more you're in offensive. You can actually do things and control and this outward, this expression. And if you don't have those degrees, then you're sort of more in like defense mode, like protecting yourself and, like trying to respond to the situation instead of making the situations. You're trying to respond to the situations. So you're still taking ownership of it, but your response to it is sort of less like lackluster. And finally, level of each phase.
Level of each phase, Baal HaSalam. Thus, the level of each parsuf, phase, precisely depends on the measure of aviyut, coarseness in the masak screen. The masak screen of Behina Dalet, phase 4, elicits the level of Keter, crown. Behina Gimel, phase 3, elicits the level of Hakma, wisdom. Behina Bet, phase 2, elicits the level of Bina, understanding. Behina Aleph, phase 1, elicits the level of Teferet, beauty. And Behina Shoresh, root phase, elicits the level of Malhut, kingdom. Explanation. Thus, the level of each phase precisely depends on the measure of coarseness in the screen. The screen of phase 4 elicits the level of crown. Phase 3 elicits the level of wisdom. Phase 2 elicits the level of understanding. Phase 1 elicits the level of beauty. And root phase elicits the level of kingdom.
Level of each phase. Explanation. Thus, the level of each phase precisely depends on the measure of coarseness in the screen. The screen of phase 4 elicits the level of crown. Phase 3 elicits the level of wisdom. Phase 2 elicits the level of understanding. Phase 1 elicits the level of beauty, and root phase elicits the level of kingdom. So you can see how we started and we're ending with this, how depending on the different coarseness we use, it will reach a different height. So when we have the coarseness of phase 4, it goes all the way up to crown. Coarseness of phase 3 goes all the way up to wisdom. Coarseness of phase 2 goes all the way up to understanding. Coarseness of phase 1 goes up to beauty. And if we only have the root phase of coarseness, we can only go up to Malchut, which is kingdom. All right, I think we'll stop here and enter the after party.